Hey everyone, this is Pete, and welcome back to Atari A to Z, a series of short playthroughs of Atari 8-bit games, some which I grew up with and some which are new to me. Today we're looking at Interval, which isn't really a game at all, but I found it quite interesting anyway. It's a piece of software developed by Douglas Crockford, who we last saw here on our Atari A to Z with Jane's program, which, as you may recall, was more of a software toy than the game in itself as well. So Douglas Crockford currently works for PayPal, and he describes himself as being someone who managed to find the good bits in JavaScript. He also had a defining influence on getting the JSON standard established as well. So he's sort of been a big name in computing for a long time. He's actually been working in computers since the early days though. His big break was after he wrote a game called Galahad and the Holy Grail for the Atari Program Exchange, after which Chris Crawford, who was a very well established, very well known programmer in the period, he hired him on at Atari. And Crockford then went on to contribute to a number of different games at Atari, and he later went on to work at Lucasfilm as well, where he contributed to a bunch of really beloved games such as Rescue on Fractalus and Coronis Rift. So Interval, which we're looking at today, as I say, isn't really a game. It's an ear training program intended for musicians, so it's particularly helpful for those who are training for music exams and having to do aural tests and things. As a musician myself, I play piano, clarinet and saxophone and have done since an early age. I found the existence of this program to be pretty interesting, and I'm intrigued to see how helpful it might be for someone learning music or perhaps someone teaching music as well. So let's have a look at Interval. Okay, here we are with Interval, a music education game. Oh, we just describe it as a game, that's good. By Douglas Crockford. This title screen kind of reminds me vaguely of Alternate Reality, the role-playing game. Just the font's not identical, but it's a custom font, which kind of makes me think of that game. And these coloured stripes down at the bottom as well, yeah. So that makes me think of that very much. So, as I mentioned in the introduction, this is a ear training game designed for people who want to improve their aural skills. That's aural with an A, not an O. And yeah, so there's 4 different parts to this. The first is same different, then there's ascending, descending, intervals, and perfect pitch. So let's take a look at each of these, and I'll do my best to explain each of them for those of you who maybe don't know about musical terminology and so on. So the first one is very simple. You hear 2 notes, and you have to answer simply whether they are the same note or 2 different notes. You have these 3 options down at the bottom to repeat the sequence. You can choose how long they last for, but changing that sequence actually plays 2 different notes. So in that case they were the same. In that case they're different. They're the same. I'm going to put that back down to long, just so it's a little bit easier for you to hear. So if you can hear, those are 2 different notes. Again, 2 different notes. Different again. Different again. And the same. So hopefully you can see from that that's a very basic aural skill. But some people actually struggle quite a bit with that. I've known several people who you can play them different notes and they'll think they're the same, or vice versa. And so that's a good sort of basic aural skill to train yourself on. So let's go back to the menu. And let's go on to the next step, which is ascending and descending. So what this means is, again, you're going to hear 2 notes, and you have to say whether the second one is a higher pitch or a lower pitch than the other one. So if it's a higher pitch, it's ascending, it's an ascending interval. And if it's a lower pitch, it's a descending interval. So in that case, that's ascending. In that case, that's descending, because it's going down. It's a higher note and then a slightly lower note. And in that case, they're the same. And again, down at the bottom, you've got the same options, so you can repeat the interval, so you can hear it again if you need to. You can change the duration of the notes if you want to give yourself a bit more of a challenge. And in this one, you can actually change the number of octaves that you're working with as well. An octave is 8 notes, basically. It's the distance between 2 notes of the same name, so from C to C, or A to A, or whatever. If you think of a piano keyboard or an electronic keyboard, it's the distance between 2 of the exact same note. Some people can easily pick out what an octave sounds like because, although it's not the same note, they have a very sort of similar sound to them. It's all to do with frequencies and so on. I think it's like a, I don't know, it's like a multiple of a frequency or something like that. But yeah, here we are working within 1 octave, which is basically 1 set of 8 notes on the keyboard, but you can increase that up to 5 octaves. So again, we can hear that that's a descending pattern. Now, that's ascending, but that was actually an octave apart. So some people would misinterpret that as being the same. So let's say that's ascending. That's ascending, but at a very high pitch. There's descending. And again, that's an octave apart, so some people might mistake those for the exact same note. Now we've got some low notes. Those are ascending. Those are descending. Now, this program is actually quite a good way of doing this training because the tones that the Atari is producing here, they are very nice, pure tones. So there's no sort of variation from sort of a specific instrument. There's none of an instrument being slightly out of tune or anything. When you tell a computer to produce a particular note, it's always going to produce that exact same note. And in fact, the parameters you can pass to the Atari sound commands, they actually correspond to the notes that you would find on a piano as well. So there are ways of sort of getting little bits of distortion and putting things out of tune and pitch bending and that sort of thing, I believe. But for the most part, the values you can pass to the sound command mean that they are the exact notes that you would expect. So this is a really good way of training your ear on a nice sort of, I guess you call it a neutral, perfect sound. So that's that game there, the ascending or descending game. Back to the main menu. We now look at intervals, which is what the game takes its name from. Now, intervals describe the distance between 2 notes. So they start from a perfect unison, which is 2 of the same note, and then they go 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, all the way up to 8th, which is the same as an octave. So let's see how this works. So this actually has a sort of gradual increase in difficulty here. So it starts by only asking you whether it's a perfect fifth or a perfect unison. So that will be between C and C or C and G. So if we repeat that there, we can hear that those are the exact same note. So that is a perfect unison. Now those are different. So at this point, you could probably work out that that is a perfect fifth. But when I was learning these skills to do my associated board music exams when I was a kid, I was taught to recognise a lot of these intervals by using melodies that make use of them. And the perfect fifth is the beginning of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. It's Twinkle, Twinkle. Let's hear that again. There we go. So that is a perfect fifth. And that's the same, but much lower because it's remembered our 5 octave setting there. So we'll say perfect fifth. That's a perfect unison down at that same low pitch. Now it's added octave into the mix as well. So you have to be able to recognise when it's not the same note, but it's the same note an octave apart. So it's not the exact same note, but it is an instance of the same note name. So if you look down the right-hand column on the screen here, you can see that the 8th there, the perfect octave, is from C to C. So we'll just repeat that again. And again, that's another octave there. Now again, think back to your tunes. That one sounds like the start of Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. Twinkle Twinkle. So that's a perfect fifth. And that's the same. Another octave. Now we're adding in perfect fourths. And the way you remember perfect fourths is this the start of Here Comes the Bride. Here comes the bride. Same again. Hear that again. That's an octave, I think. And another one. That's a unison because they're the same note. Now we're adding in a major third, which is from C to E. And the way you remember this one is it's the start of the Christmas carol While Shepherds Watch. So it's While Shepherds. Same again, but much lower. Now, one nice thing you can do in this game is that you can change the key as well. So we've been working in the key of C, first of all, which is the key that most people start learning things in, because it's on the piano, it's the one that doesn't use any black notes, and on most other instruments, it's the one that doesn't involve any sharps or flats. So it's a good, easy key to get started with. But if you want to, you can change to any of the other keys, or indeed random, which will pick any key for each question. So let's challenge ourselves and do that. So listen to those again. Think of the tune. Twinkle, twinkle. So that's a fifth. And again. So that's a fourth because it's the beginning of Here Comes the Bride. Here comes the bride. Excuse my singing. I'm terribly sorry. I didn't hear that one. That's a fourth again. So now we're adding in the major sixth. What was the tune for this one? I think it was like My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean or something like that. But we've got a perfect unison there. There we are. So it's My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean, and so on. So the first two notes of that are a major sixth. There's While Shepherds Watched, or the major third again. And again. There's an octave. Now you notice that it's missing some of these out deliberately, and the order that it's training you in these is actually tends to be the order that you learn to recognize these intervals with the oral tests that you do for music exams. So you learn perfect unison, perfect octave, and perfect fifth first of all, because those are the easiest to recognize for the ear. Perfect fifth is a very common progression in music, and it's very easy to recognize. Perfect fourth then is the next easiest to recognize, because perfect fifth and perfect fourth are the intervals that sort of endings of pieces of music are based around. So perfect fifth is like the most common one. Perfect fourth is the next one. It's heard a lot in religious music, and then you gradually work your way through from there, and you hear all these different ones. So if you keep playing that game, you'll eventually learn to recognize all of those intervals within an octave. Now, you can actually have intervals that go beyond an octave. You can have like 11th, 12th, 13th and all that sort of thing. But this just goes up to an octave, because 11th, 12th and 13th and so on are just the same as these intervals with an octave in between them. So, all right, let's leave that one there for now. And then finally, we have the perfect pitch test. So perfect pitch describes someone who can hear a note and immediately identify what it is. It's a skill that some people seem to have innately, and other people have been able to train themselves to do it as well. So let's have a go at this. Okay, let's stick this down to one octave, because I'm not super confident on my skills with this. So we're in the key of C, and this is going to be either C or G. Not actually sure on that one. Let's say it's G. It is G. So that one must be C. That's C again. That's G. That's down to C again. Now you can actually work some of these out by remembering the previous note and using the intervals that you learned in the previous game to kind of build up that knowledge. Or you can just learn to recognise the notes yourself. There's F. And again, the longer you play this game for, the more possible answers you'll have to recognise. And you'll get a feel for it as you go through. And as before, we have the option to vary the number of octaves that we're working with. Let's pump that up to 5 and see how much more difficult it is. No, so that's wrong. So you get that flash there if it's wrong. It doesn't punish you or anything like that because it's not keeping score. But it just tells you that that one's wrong. Not actually sure what that is, actually. It's not E, so what is it? It's A, apparently. Oh, that's much harder. That's much more difficult with those additional octaves in there. No, same again. Yeah, I'm going to put that back down to 1. Oh, what am I doing? Oh, has that actually removed some because I've been getting them wrong? I think it might have done. This is easy. Now we've got a sharp in the mix as well, so we've got D sharp added to all that. Yeah, so you can learn to recognise that that sounds a little bit different. Same for that one. Okay, you can also change the key of this one. And I assume there's a random... Oh, there's no random option for this one. So you just pick a key that you want to learn to recognise notes in. And that becomes the starting point of the scale. So let's try in E flat. The tricky one with this is it doesn't give you what the bass note is. It doesn't give you what that starting E flat is. But once you latch onto 1, you can start working things out for yourself. And again, you can use intervals to help you out in that. But anyway, it's as much fun as that is to sit and play this and train my perfect pitch, which I've never really had perfect pitch, but I can see that game being really, really helpful in training yourself to recognise various notes there. So yeah, that's really interesting. So this is really cool, actually, and this would have been really helpful to me when I was growing up and doing those music exams and so on, because I used to absolutely hate oral tests because I found them quite difficult. I could do them, and I could often do them quite well, but I found them quite frustrating to sort of practice and train yourself at. If I'd had something to do on the computer to help me out with that, then yeah, I think that would have really helped me out. So yeah, I'm sorry I never came across this. That's a shame. But anyway, that's Interval by Douglas Crockford, a music education game that is actually still pretty useful today. So if you happen to have an Atari 8-bit to hand in your music classroom or in your music teaching room, then yeah, consider whipping it out and loading this onto it and helping your students out with it. Or indeed, if you're learning music for yourself, consider checking this out and learning things for yourself. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again next time. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please help out the channel by leaving a like or a comment and subscribing. New episodes of Atari A to Z are on Tuesdays and Atari ST A to Z on Thursdays. Check out atariatoz.wordpress.com for a full archive. Do please also check out my other projects moegamer.net, where I explore Japanese and Japanese-inspired games from yesterday and today, and videopackgames.wordpress.com, which aims to catalogue the small but well-formed library of the Philips G7000 Videopack computer, also known as the Magnavox Odyssey 2. You can also support my work on Patreon or buy me a coffee. You can find links to do both down in the video description. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.